When a relationship ends with someone who displays strong narcissistic traits, people often search for one question above all others: what affects them the most? The internet is filled with dramatic claims promising secret techniques that supposedly make a narcissistic ex regret losing you or come running back. While these ideas may be emotionally appealing, the reality is far more complex. No contact is one of the most widely recommended strategies after an emotionally unhealthy relationship, but its true power is often misunderstood. It is not designed to punish, manipulate, or force another person to change. Instead, it is a tool that protects your emotional well-being and creates the distance needed to recover from unhealthy patterns. To understand why no contact can have such a profound effect on relationship dynamics, it helps to first understand how narcissistic traits can influence the way some people experience intimacy. Individuals with significant narcissistic traits often rely heavily on external admiration, praise, and validation to maintain a stable sense of self. Their confidence may appear unshakable on the outside, but psychological research suggests that in many cases, this confidence masks a much more fragile self-esteem. Positive attention temporarily reinforces their self-image, while criticism, rejection, or even the possibility of abandonment can feel far more threatening than it might to someone with a more stable sense of self. This heightened sensitivity is not simply about disliking negative feedback, because almost everyone finds criticism uncomfortable. Rather, for some individuals with strong narcissistic traits, external validation plays a central role in regulating self-esteem. Compliments, admiration, praise, and approval become sources of psychological reassurance, helping maintain an image of competence, importance, or superiority. When that steady flow of validation is interrupted, it can create feelings of insecurity that are difficult to tolerate. As a result, even relatively minor disagreements may be interpreted as deeply personal attacks. A partner expressing disappointment, setting a healthy boundary, or asking for greater emotional accountability may not be heard as constructive feedback. Instead, these ordinary relationship experiences can sometimes be perceived as rejection or disrespect. This does not mean every person with narcissistic traits reacts the same way, nor does it mean every disagreement produces an extreme response. Personality exists on a spectrum, and reactions vary from person to person. However, research suggests that individuals with pronounced narcissistic characteristics often display heightened emotional reactivity when their self-image feels threatened. This vulnerability helps explain why some relationships involving narcissistic traits can become emotionally unpredictable. During periods of admiration, the relationship may feel exceptionally close, passionate, and rewarding. But when criticism or conflict arises, emotional distance, defensiveness, blame, or anger may quickly replace warmth. Rather than viewing conflict as a normal part of intimacy, the individual may unconsciously focus on protecting their self-esteem. They might dismiss the other person's concerns, shift responsibility, become unusually defensive, or temporarily withdraw from emotional closeness. Ironically, these reactions are often driven less by genuine confidence than by the fear of losing it. The carefully maintained self-image depends heavily on feeling admired and emotionally secure. When that image is challenged, uncomfortable emotions such as shame, inadequacy, embarrassment, or vulnerability may surface beneath the outward confidence. To reduce these feelings, some individuals instinctively protect themselves by denying mistakes, seeking reassurance, or distancing themselves from situations that make them feel emotionally exposed. Understanding this dynamic is important because it shifts the focus away from the misconception that people with narcissistic traits are simply unaffected by relationships. Many experience genuine emotional pain, but that pain is often filtered through the lens of protecting self-esteem rather than building mutual understanding. This distinction does not excuse harmful behavior, nor does it mean change is impossible. Instead, it helps explain why criticism, rejection, or perceived abandonment can evoke reactions that seem surprisingly intense or confusing to the people closest to them. This dynamic often begins during the earliest stages of a relationship. The connection may develop with remarkable intensity. You may feel deeply admired, constantly complimented, and emotionally swept off your feet. The future is discussed quickly, affection seems limitless, and the relationship feels unlike anything either of you has experienced before. This phase, commonly referred to as idealization, can create an extraordinary emotional bond. However, the partner is sometimes loved more for the role they play in supporting the person's self-image than for who they truly are as an individual. As every healthy relationship eventually does, reality begins to replace fantasy. Everyday responsibilities emerge. Differences in personality become more noticeable. Conflicts arise, boundaries are established, and both partners reveal ordinary human imperfections. For emotionally secure individuals, this transition often deepens intimacy because it allows love to become more authentic. For someone struggling with pronounced narcissistic traits, however, these normal relationship developments may be experienced very differently. Instead of seeing disagreement as a natural part of intimacy, they may interpret it as rejection, disrespect, or evidence that the relationship no longer provides the validation they unconsciously seek. This is why relationships involving narcissistic traits sometimes follow confusing cycles of intense closeness, followed by emotional distance. A partner who once seemed completely devoted may suddenly become critical, withdrawn, or emotionally unavailable. These shifts often leave the other person desperately searching for answers, wondering what they did wrong. In reality, the change may have far less to do with the partner's behavior than with the individual's struggle to tolerate vulnerability, disappointment, or perceived threats to their self-esteem. When the relationship finally ends, many people assume the goal should be making the other person regret losing them. That mindset, while understandable, often keeps emotional attention focused on the former partner. No contact becomes most powerful when its purpose changes. Instead of asking, "How will this affect them?" the healthier question becomes, "How will this help me heal?" The answer is surprisingly significant. No contact interrupts unhealthy emotional patterns. It removes constant exposure to texts, arguments, apologies, mixed signals, and social media monitoring. Without these repeated emotional triggers, the nervous system gradually begins to calm. Obsessive thinking slowly decreases. Personal identity starts expanding beyond the relationship. Rather than waiting for someone else's validation, you begin rebuilding confidence through your own experiences, friendships, interests, and personal growth. Whether the former partner feels sadness, anger, relief, confusion, or indifference depends entirely on the individual. Psychology cannot predict a universal reaction because people with narcissistic traits are not all the same. Some may attempt to reconnect, some may seek validation elsewhere. Others may genuinely reflect on their behavior, still others may simply move forward. Healthy recovery does not depend on accurately predicting which outcome will occur. It depends on reclaiming your emotional independence regardless of their response. Ultimately, the greatest power is not found in discovering the perfect strategy to influence another person's emotions. It lies in reaching a point where your peace of mind no longer depends on what they think, feel, or choose to do. That shift represents genuine emotional freedom. Instead of living in reaction to someone else's behavior, you become the author of your own healing. And that, more than any attempt at revenge or manipulation, is what truly transforms the end of a difficult relationship into the beginning of a healthier future. There's a common idea online that there is something that affects a person with strong narcissistic traits far more than simply ending communication. It's an intriguing claim, but the reality is more nuanced than many viral videos suggest. No contact is widely recommended because it helps the person leaving the relationship heal, regain emotional stability, and establish healthy boundaries. Its purpose is not to punish or manipulate someone else. Yet, understanding why no contact can feel significant in relationships involving narcissistic traits requires looking at how these relationship patterns often unfold. At first glance, these relationships can feel almost magical. The connection develops quickly. Conversations seem endless, compliments flow effortlessly, and the future appears full of promise. Many people describe feeling uniquely understood, as though they have finally found someone who sees them in a way no one else ever has. This early stage often feels intoxicating because it creates an intense emotional atmosphere that is difficult to compare with ordinary dating experiences. Psychologists often describe this stage as idealization. During idealization, a partner may be viewed through a lens of perfection rather than reality. Instead of gradually discovering one another over time, the relationship accelerates. The other person becomes associated with hopes, dreams, admiration, and emotional security. While anyone can idealize a new romantic partner to some extent, people with pronounced narcissistic traits may experience this process more intensely because their self-esteem depends heavily on external validation. That distinction is important. Contrary to popular belief, many people with narcissistic traits are not walking through life overflowing with genuine confidence. Research suggests that beneath grandiosity, there can be considerable insecurity. The outward image often functions as protection against feelings of inadequacy or vulnerability. Praise temporarily strengthens self-esteem, while criticism or rejection may feel disproportionately painful. Because of this, relationships can become deeply connected to emotional regulation. Rather than simply enjoying love for its own sake, the relationship may become intertwined with identity, status, admiration, or reassurance. The partner is not merely another individual with strengths and weaknesses. Instead, they may become part of a carefully constructed emotional system that helps maintain a desired self-image. This does not mean the feelings are necessarily fake. Many people with narcissistic traits experience genuine affection, excitement, attachment, and even profound emotional pain. The challenge is that these emotions can become entangled with psychological needs that make healthy intimacy difficult to sustain. As everyday life begins replacing fantasy, reality inevitably enters the picture. No relationship remains in the honeymoon stage forever. Daily responsibilities emerge. Disagreements occur. Individual differences become impossible to ignore. Both partners reveal imperfections. This transition is perfectly normal in healthy relationships because genuine intimacy develops through accepting each other's humanity rather than maintaining impossible ideals. For someone struggling with narcissistic traits, however, this transition may feel particularly uncomfortable. Instead of viewing imperfections as ordinary parts of human relationships, they may experience them as disappointments, personal insults, or evidence that the relationship no longer fulfills the emotional role it once served. Small disagreements can suddenly feel much larger than they objectively are. Constructive feedback may be interpreted as harsh criticism. Requests for compromise may feel like attacks on personal worth. This heightened sensitivity can create confusion for both partners. One day, the relationship feels intensely close. The next day, emotional distance appears almost overnight. Many partners spend months trying to understand what changed. The answer is rarely simple. Human behavior is influenced by personality, attachment history, emotional maturity, mental health, and life circumstances. There is no single explanation for every relationship involving narcissistic traits. Still, psychology offers useful frameworks for understanding why these cycles sometimes emerge. One important concept involves self-esteem regulation. Most people possess multiple sources of identity: family, friendships, career, personal achievements, values, hobbies, community. When one area becomes difficult, the others often provide emotional stability. Someone whose self-esteem relies heavily on admiration from others may have fewer internal resources available during emotional setbacks. As a result, relationship conflicts may carry enormous psychological weight. If admiration decreases, emotional discomfort increases. If reassurance fades, insecurity becomes more noticeable. If validation disappears, the person's self-image may temporarily weaken. This does not excuse unhealthy behavior. It simply explains why certain reactions may appear surprisingly intense. Another important concept is emotional avoidance. Ironically, individuals who appear exceptionally confident can sometimes struggle the most with vulnerability. Deep emotional intimacy requires admitting uncertainty. It requires apologizing after mistakes. It requires tolerating disappointment. It requires accepting that neither partner is perfect. These experiences demand emotional flexibility. When vulnerability feels threatening, distancing behaviors sometimes become protective strategies. Someone may withdraw after becoming emotionally close. They may minimize problems rather than discuss them. They may suddenly become critical. They may focus on flaws that previously seemed insignificant. From the outside, these shifts feel bewildering. From the inside, they may represent attempts to reduce uncomfortable emotional exposure. Again, not everyone with narcissistic traits behaves this way. Personality exists on a spectrum, and every individual is unique. This is why mental health professionals avoid making sweeping predictions about how every person will react after a breakup. The internet often encourages simple stories. Reality rarely cooperates. You might hear claims that every narcissist returns, that every narcissist regrets leaving, that every narcissist panics when ignored. None of these statements accurately reflect psychological science. Some attempt reconciliation, others move on quickly. Some experience significant emotional distress, others appear largely unaffected. Human beings are simply too complex for absolute rules. So why does no contact often seem effective? The answer has less to do with controlling another person's emotions and much more to do with changing the relationship dynamic itself. When communication continues after a painful breakup, familiar interaction patterns often remain active. Arguments continue, validation continues, attempts to explain continue, hope continues. Even conflict maintains emotional engagement. No contact interrupts that cycle. Instead of repeatedly reacting to each other's messages, social media activity, or emotional highs and lows, both individuals lose immediate access to those familiar patterns. For the person choosing no contact, this creates space for healing. Without constant reminders, emotional intensity gradually decreases. Thought patterns become less obsessive. Perspective slowly returns. The nervous system begins calming. Identity expands beyond the relationship. Whether the other person experiences confusion, relief, sadness, anger, or indifference depends entirely on the individual. There is no universal response. Some people eventually reflect deeply on the relationship. Others seek distraction. Others begin new relationships quickly. Some pursue therapy. Others repeat familiar patterns. Healthy recovery does not depend on predicting which outcome occurs. It depends on redirecting attention toward one's own well-being. This is perhaps the most misunderstood part of no contact. Its greatest strength is not what it supposedly does to another person. Its greatest strength is what it does for the individual practicing it. Healing becomes possible because emotional energy stops revolving around someone else's reactions. Instead of wondering whether they miss you, you begin asking what you need. Instead of analyzing every social media post, you start rebuilding routines. Instead of trying to earn validation, you gradually rediscover self-worth that does not depend on another person's approval. That shift changes everything. People recovering from emotionally difficult relationships often describe a surprising realization. The absence of constant emotional turbulence begins feeling peaceful rather than lonely. At first, silence feels uncomfortable. The phone remains quiet. Old habits continue pulling attention toward memories. Questions remain unanswered. Closure seems impossible. Yet over time, the silence becomes something entirely different. It transforms into emotional breathing room. Without constant emotional activation, many people rediscover interests they had neglected. Friendships strengthen. Sleep improves. Stress decreases. Confidence slowly returns. These changes occur regardless of whether the former partner reaches out. That distinction matters because healing rooted in another person's behavior remains fragile. Healing rooted in personal growth becomes far more durable. Psychologists often emphasize that lasting recovery involves rebuilding identity rather than simply ending communication. Relationships naturally shape our routines, expectations, and future plans. After a breakup, those structures disappear. The resulting emptiness can feel overwhelming. Healthy recovery involves gradually filling that space with meaningful experiences rather than waiting for another person to restore it. This process takes time. There are setbacks. Certain songs trigger memories. Specific places bring emotions rushing back. Anniversaries feel unexpectedly difficult. These experiences are normal. Emotional healing is rarely linear. Some days bring confidence. Other days bring grief. Progress continues anyway. If the former partner reaches out months later, the healthiest response depends on the specific circumstances. Have unhealthy patterns genuinely changed? Has accountability been demonstrated? Has meaningful personal growth occurred? Or are familiar cycles simply beginning again? These questions matter far more than whether someone expresses regret. Words alone rarely predict lasting change. Consistent behavior over time provides much stronger evidence. Whether someone has narcissistic traits or not, healthy relationships share remarkably similar foundations: mutual respect, honest communication, empathy, accountability, emotional safety, willingness to repair conflict, curiosity about each other's perspectives. No personality label eliminates the importance of these qualities. Likewise, no diagnosis automatically prevents growth. People can change. Some do, some do not. Meaningful change typically requires self-awareness, genuine motivation, and often professional support. It rarely occurs because another person waited long enough, loved hard enough, or sacrificed enough. That realization can feel both painful and liberating. Painful because it challenges the hope that one perfect action will transform another person. Liberating because it returns responsibility to where it truly belongs. Your responsibility is your own healing, your own boundaries, your own emotional health, your own future. Ultimately, the question is not what affects someone with narcissistic traits the most after a breakup. The more meaningful question is this: what helps you recover in the healthiest possible way? For most people, the answer involves creating distance from unhealthy dynamics, surrounding themselves with supportive relationships, seeking professional guidance when needed, and gradually rebuilding a life that no longer revolves around earning another person's validation. That journey may not create dramatic viral moments. It may not satisfy fantasies about revenge or poetic justice, but it offers something far more valuable: peace, confidence, freedom, and the opportunity to build future relationships grounded not in idealization or emotional uncertainty, but in mutual respect, authenticity, and genuine connection. But that idealization fades away surprisingly fast, revealing the deceptive tendencies that were always sitting underneath it. Living through the aftermath feels a lot like trying to calm a raging storm, one that leaves behind real emotional scars once it finally passes. Given how much scrutiny has been placed on the psychological impact of these dynamics, it's easy to start viewing narcissistic behavior almost like a kind of social contagion, something that genuinely needs to be understood and contained. The aftermath of a breakup with a narcissist reveals an entire intricate world most people never expected to encounter. Whether you were the one who initiated no contact, or whether you found yourself blocked across every platform and every phone number, the emotional turmoil that follows can feel completely overwhelming. Narcissists frequently initiate the breakup themselves, which tends to leave their former partners feeling incomplete, confused, and strangely open to reconciliation despite everything that happened. But if you were the one who chose to end things first, that's genuinely a commendable decision, especially given how difficult being with a narcissist actually is on a day-to-day basis. Understanding a narcissistic breakup really starts with recognizing that, at the very beginning, they perceive their partners almost like saviors, genuinely believing this other person can somehow resolve all their internal issues for them. But eventually, it becomes painfully clear that no single person can single-handedly fix someone else's problems and inner demons. You, as their partner, were never a magician. Narcissists typically require extensive therapy, and frankly, sometimes it feels like they'd need a few exorcisms too. Not simply a relationship with you to magically fix what's broken inside them. Being discarded by a narcissist actually reveals a lot about what genuinely irritates them most after a breakup ends. Their greatest struggle by far is dealing with your apathy. Much like oversized children throwing a tantrum, narcissists tend to crumble when they're the ones discarded because it strips away a core part of their sense of self. Your ability to remain completely unbothered, to simply withdraw the attention and control they crave so desperately, becomes their worst nightmare. Understanding these dynamics gives people real power to regain control of their own lives and move forward in a much healthier direction after leaving a narcissistic relationship behind. Grasping what actually happens in the aftermath of a breakup like this is genuinely essential. Moving on from a narcissist demands real mastery over your own emotions and your own actions going forward. A narcissist, being highly skilled at diverting attention away from themselves, will often redirect their focus quickly toward an entirely new target once you're gone. Understanding this particular pattern helps people reclaim their sense of autonomy much faster. Real closure is genuinely rare with narcissists, and that scarcity directly contradicts their deep aversion to any sense of finality, since finality would mean relinquishing the control they crave so desperately. They resist offering you closure, which only complicates the entire post-breakup process for whoever used to be their partner. Choosing to stonewall them completely and committing fully to total disengagement can actually overpower a narcissist in ways they don't expect. A remarkable shift happens the moment you remain genuinely unaffected by their maneuvers and stop paying attention to their whereabouts altogether. Narcissists thrive on emotional investment from other people, and they crave attention above almost everything else. Emotionally detaching from them can genuinely confound their expectations and lead to real, lasting liberation for you, even long after the relationship has officially ended. Narcissists crave visible signs of your distress. They thrive specifically on witnessing your vulnerability, especially when it's displayed across social media, and they genuinely revel in your emotional turmoil when they can see it play out publicly. This is exactly why taking a real break from social media after a separation matters so much. Narcissists might even resort to creating fake profiles or sending friend requests from suspicious, unfamiliar accounts, all just to maintain some thread of connection with you. Indifference poses a massive challenge for them specifically. because they feel utterly powerless the moment they're met with your genuine lack of concern for their actions, their preferences, or even their basic existence in your life. That kind of indifference wounds their ego deeply and inflicts real, lasting agony on their sense of self. It honestly doesn't matter who initiated the breakup in the first place. At first, they might feel a temporary sense of control over the situation. But once they find themselves barred from accessing your social media updates and blocked from every form of communication, witnessing you resurface online looking genuinely happy and thriving becomes a real source of torment for them. The separation itself, along with everything that follows it, tends to unveil the deeper wounds sitting underneath narcissism. To genuinely heal on a personal level, it becomes crucial to recognize the manipulative tactics these individuals rely on, and to actively resist their ongoing efforts to maintain dominance over your life. Claiming your own autonomy and emotional well-being involves establishing genuinely firm boundaries and disconnecting from digital platforms after these kinds of encounters. Navigating relationships with narcissists, especially in family situations or shared co-parenting arrangements, requires real finesse and careful thought. Many people find genuine relief in a technique known as gray rocking, which involves essentially ignoring a narcissist's provocations entirely to demonstrate that their tactics simply hold no power over you anymore. This seemingly simple approach can prove remarkably effective when dealing with narcissists, particularly because you represent a primary source of their ego boost. By adopting gray rocking as your approach, you directly challenge the emotional investment that fuels their manipulative behavior in the first place. As you detach emotionally and refuse to engage with whatever they're doing, you essentially become a fleeting, forgettable presence on their radar. This intentional emotional distance disrupts their manipulation tactics at the root and ultimately leads to their sense of control collapsing entirely. However, there's a genuinely intriguing phenomenon that occurs once a narcissist shifts their focus toward a brand new source of admiration. The emotional detachment that once confused and frustrated them may start to diminish your appeal in their eyes over time. In response, they might actually attempt to reconnect with you specifically to try to elicit those same emotional reactions they used to enjoy getting from you. This entire cycle of attraction followed by rejection can repeat itself over and over again, which really underscores just how intricate and unpredictable narcissistic personalities genuinely are underneath the surface. Comprehending narcissistic relationships thoroughly is genuinely vital for both personal growth and long-term resilience. Drawing on broader insights around self-sacrifice, humility, and personal accountability can meaningfully help people navigate these particularly challenging dynamics as they move forward. Developing personally and establishing genuinely healthy boundaries when dealing with narcissism often requires guidance and encouragement from multiple sources in your life, both practical and personal. By presenting yourself as emotionally unaffected and genuinely disinterested in the face of narcissistic manipulation, you send a remarkably powerful message without saying a single word. This signals to the narcissist that they've completely lost their engagement with you and their influence over your emotional state, striking directly at their core fear of losing control within relationships. Because narcissists tend to perceive relationships fundamentally as a kind of game centered around control, your calm demeanor in the face of their manipulations can genuinely unsettle them, often leading to either heightened fixation on regaining your attention or significant ego damage that prompts them to withdraw entirely. This represents a real blow to their narcissistic ego, one that many of them genuinely struggle to recover from afterward. Sharing this kind of understanding with others facing similar challenges is genuinely important, because even after experiencing a narcissistic discard and committing to a no-contact approach, maintaining your composure throughout remains essential to fully neutralizing their lingering influence over you. Resilience is genuinely key here, and it's worth recognizing clearly that healing and truly thriving afterward aren't just possible, they're essential for your overall well-being going forward. Take care of yourself throughout your recovery journey, because you genuinely deserve to come out the other side of this stronger and more at peace than you were before.